You know, it's okay to smile today, folks. It really is. It's a good day to smile. The Trump peace plan has two phases. Phase one is supposed to be implemented now and through Monday, Tuesday, in which the Israelis end their siege on the city of Gaza, which they have surrounded and are poised to destroy Hamas once and for all, and move to an intermediary line where they still are in Gaza, covering 52% of the territory, and simultaneously, in exchange for all the hostages, 48 of them, 20 who are supposed to be alive. Now, before I go on, let's stop right there. What kind of subhuman cockroaches take hostages like this, treat them like this, use them as bargaining chips? It's cockroaches who are Islamists, throwbacks to the 7th century, who hold belief systems in which the more people you kill, the more horrible the death, preferably debauchery and torture and rape as you're murdering them, preferably in front of their loved ones, burn them alive, decapitate them, and all the rest, the most horrible things you can think of. They believe that that's how they serve God and that's how they'll go to heaven. If you don't have an understanding of who these people are and what drives them, and unfortunately most of the people in the West do not, then you think that, well, what's the big deal? You can make a deal with these people. Doesn't work that way. Nonetheless, on phase one in the Trump peace plan, it's the release of the hostages. The Israelis pull back, and there's to be a release of nearly 2,000 terrorists and criminals in Israeli prisons, including 250 of whom are the worst kind of terrorists, and some subset of that who are mass murderers. Of course, we would never do this, but that's what the Israelis have agreed to do. Phase two is very interesting, and I'm very curious to see how this is supposed to work. Phase two, the question I have is what happens to Hamas? Hamas is supposed to be disarmed, I guess dispersed. Of course, that doesn't prevent them from meeting up later and arming up later, something that I think is being missed, but nonetheless, disarmed and removed from Gaza. Now, according to reports, and who knows how accurate they are, this is an area of resistance for the terrorists. We shall see how this works out. Phase two will be more interesting. Now, keep something else in mind. At least as the agreement was written, even though there have been apparently some changes. If phase two isn't executed, all bets are off. Now, this is the genius, actually, of the Trump plan. The hostages get out under phase one. Now, phase two has all these particulars, these details, many of which we don't know yet, that I guess they're trying to work out, involving the governance there, involving Hamas, the disarming of Hamas, the demilitarization of Gaza, all these things. And so phase two will be much more complicated on it. And this is what we will keep our eye on. Now, the fact of the matter is there's not another person who could have even brought the situation there to this point. There's simply not another. Trump is historic, and he is iconic. And as you will learn if you watch Saturday's Life, Liberty, and Levin from the Israeli ambassador to the United States, Ambassador Leiter, My interview of him is really quite remarkable. We also have Ron Johnson all about these FBI monitoring Republican senators and House members. But you're going to hear the ambassador who was there at the table through it all, and still is, that the pressure was not placed on Israel, despite the reports in Axios by the self-hating Israeli Ravid and other reports and other equally unreliable media outlets, so-called. The pressure was on Hamas. And he will reveal, for the first time, so I'll reveal it to you, that your president, my president, our president, told Qatar, told Turkey, told Egypt, but particularly Qatar and Turkey. You have the Hamas leadership in your countries. Now you either force them, pressure them to accept this agreement, or you remove them. You never heard that before, did you, Mr. President? Excuse me, Mr. Producer? You didn't hear that before. Now that's the Donald Trump we know, man. It really is. Either you tell them to get this done and you force them, or remove them, release them. That was the pressure. That's not what Axios and Ravin reported. That's not what the other outlets reported, and yet that's what happened. Eyewitness account by the ambassador to the United States from Israel. And that's what we would expect from our president, because that's the kind of man he is. Folks, I have a question for you. Do you believe America's best days are still ahead? With the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence coming up in less than a year, my friends at the Heritage Foundation are taking stock of the current situation, and they need your input. They've launched a survey on America's future to gauge how Americans feel right now about where we are as a nation and where we're headed in the next 250 years. You know, for decades, your American values have been under attack, but now, with President Trump's administration in office, we have an opportunity to turn the tide and usher in a new golden age for America. But the Heritage Foundation needs to hear from you. What policies do patriots like you most care about? What do you believe are the defining principles of America? What legacy do you believe we should pass on to the next generation? Please visit heritage.org/Levin today and share your feedback and help shape the future of America. That's heritage.org/LEVIN. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation. I'm going to spend some time a little bit tonight. We've got a lot to cover. A lot on Saturday night on Life, Liberty, and Levin. Getting into the details. How did we get to this point? And when we mean this point, what do we mean? And just to give it a summary, we got to this point for two reasons. Benjamin Netanyahu, the greatest prime minister in the history of Israel, the longest-serving prime minister in the history of Israel, decided he was going to defeat Hamas. And that included the need to defeat Hezbollah in Iran. Why? Because you might recall Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran actually were planning a simultaneous attack from the south, the north, and the east against the country of Israel. Hamas jumped the gun. But Hezbollah was poised with 180,000 long and mid missiles. Remember all that? And of course, Iran was poised with 3,000 ballistic missiles, we would later learn. Israel had to do urban fighting, door to door, street to street, like our Marines had to do in Iraq. And yet, they were forced to feed the citizenry of the enemy, and their own faith prevented them from obliterating Gaza over a period of weeks, the way we, and I believe rightly so, obliterated city after city in Europe and the Far East during World War II. Little good did it do for Israel, given the Western media and Western academia, given the enemy within, as they were accused of something they exactly chose not to do. Starving the Gazans when they were feeding them. Hamas was starving them. And genocide when they were giving notice to the citizenry there to get out of the way. Israel won no points for what it did, but it lost many more IDF soldiers as a result. They defeated Hezbollah for all intents and purposes, destroyed their entire leadership. Destroyed their generals, basically their lieutenants in the militia, with the beepers and the iPhones. They blew out much of Hamas's leadership. They blew out much of Iran's leadership. In fact, they defeated Iran in 12 days. And we came in and blew out their nuclear sites, crucially important. So Israel, fighting an urban war in Gaza, blowing out Hezbollah, for all intents and purposes, in Lebanon, thereby covering its southern and northern flanks, and defeating Iran in 12 days, blowing out their ground-to-air missiles, their Soviet defense systems, Russian defense systems, taking out much of their leadership, and then surrounding Hamas. So there'd be no peace talks, but for the fact that the Israeli military was able to do what the Israeli military did. And when you think about it, it's amazing. A nation of 9 million, surrounded by hundreds of millions. Nation the size of New Jersey, surrounded by massive Arab countries. And look what they were able to accomplish. That's number one. Number two, the election of Donald Trump. Crucial. Joe Biden had been funding Iran. Joe Biden helped Iran fund its nuclear program by lifting sanctions directly and indirectly, and by direct payments to Iran, hoping to buy them off. We also had individuals within our own government who were back channeling to Iran, individuals who still have not been held to account. You had Blinken, you had Sullivan, you had Harris, and of course Biden. It was a disaster. Donald Trump's elected president, the best friend the state of Israel's ever had in the Oval Office. He reverses every single Biden policy, including the continuation of the sale of ammunition and weapons to Israel. His statements, backed up by muscle, that he wanted those hostages out of there, that Iran was not going to get a nuclear weapon. Presidents had said that before. Trump meant it. Particularly when President Trump ordered the strikes on the nuclear sites. That sent a message throughout the Arab world, the Muslim world, the entire world. That sent a message. Donald Trump was opposed by the Democrats. He was opposed by our media. He was opposed by the UN. He was opposed by Europe. He was opposed by the Neanderthal Jew-hating isolationists, the self-appointed fake MAGA podcasters. And he did it anyway. And then that speech at the United Nations, where he we looked at the world collectively, every leader of the world. He denounced the institution as failing to even pursue peace. He denounced the institution as anti-Semitic. He denounced many of its member states of undermining basic human principles and civil liberties, destroying their own countries with open borders, in a tour de force like we've never seen before. And in the Arab world, he gave them an opportunity diplomatic and economic, to work closer with our country to benefit them and us.